Choose life. Choose a job. Choose a career. Choose a family. Choose a fucking big television. Choose washing machines, cars, compact disc players, and electrical cylinders. Choose a podcast. Choose the Untitled Film Podcast. Hello. It's me, Mike. And this is another commentary track for the Untitled Film Podcast. It's a little bit late. It's 20 to 1. Sunday night, Monday morning. And I thought, I've got 2 weeks off, so do you know what? I'm going to do a commentary. And I was thinking about what film I wanted to cover with this commentary. And I thought, let's go with something that's a bit of a classic. Something that has a little bit of personal meaning to me. This is the first film that I have very vivid recollections of watching when I was a kid, and it's the Terminator. So I'm going to jump straight into it because why the hell not? I'll waffle enough as the film's on. So if you want to join me in watching the Terminator, then get your discs ready and we'll get it synced up. Right now I have a black screen just before the Orion logo. So I'm going to press play in 3, 2, are you excited? I am. 1, play. Ah, the good old Orion logo. A staple of 80s VHS viewing. And typically now the dog has decided that he wants to start mithering me. Okay, so on the screen we've got Hemdale presents a Pacific Western production of a James Cameron film. For anyone who's still sinking. And now we see LA 2029 AD. Some marvellous 1980s, early 1980s, 1984, early to mid 80s special effects here. Combination of miniatures. And Cameron likes using front projection. But all these hunter killers are all miniatures. And now we get the title card coming up. And that synth score, man, it brings back so many memories. So just a tiny glimpse of the future war that's like, you know, so revered amongst fans of the Terminator. Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's weird because like Schwarzenegger gets top billing, but he's the villain of the film. I remember like so. My first memories of actually watching a film is when I was about 5-ish, and I grew up with my grandparents, and they'd gone out. I think it was a Saturday night, Friday or a Saturday night, and they'd gone out to the pub, and they left me with a babysitter, and my babysitter at the time was a girl called Tina. Don't know her last name. Nice girl, really liked her, you know, good babysitter and all. I used to get on with her. And this one particular night, Tina was looking after me, and after about half an hour of my grandparents being out, the typical knock on the door came from the babysitter's boyfriend, and I don't know that guy's name, but obviously I'm only a kid. I didn't really get what was going on back then. So obviously a boyfriend came in, and I just remember like him being on one side of me and her being on the other side of me, and I was in the middle of them on the sofa, and he brought a video round, which happened to be the Terminator. Now I don't know if it was a bootleg copy or a legit copy. But I remember him saying to her, "Oh, he'll be all right, he'll be okay," because she was like, "No, he can't watch it. He's too young." He was like, "No, he'll be fine, he'll be fine." And I asked him what it was about, and he said like a robot man. So me being a kid, I was like, "Yeah, I want to watch it." And I think they both wanted me to go to bed, but he'd said too much then. I wanted to watch the film, kind of thing. So anyway, sat in the middle of them cock blocking, completely unaware, watching this film. And like this scene came on, and obviously you've got the lightning effects and all this kind of stuff, and then you got Arnold Schwarzenegger, in the buff, in the nude, looking hench as fuck. And I just remember being really into the film, because like it was funny, because like even though her boyfriend said, "Oh, he'll be all right, he'll be all right," whenever anything remotely kind of violent happened on screen, especially with the bit where the Terminator's performing, repairs on himself, he would always cover my eyes with his hand, and I just have vivid memories of like seeing the Terminator digging his eyeball out with that scalpel through the cracks in that guy's fingers, because I could just make out enough of what was going on, and I kind of became a gore hound from that point on. Here we got Bill Paxton as one of the thugs. Can't go wrong with Bill Paxton, can you? And this guy licking his lips, looking at Arnie's schlong there. He was in the X-Files as one of the alien bounty hunters. He's been in a few things, I guess. Brutal introduction to the Terminator. Never thought about it before, but there's obviously a few gay connotations going on with that guy licking his lips when he was looking down at Arnie's dick. Brian Thompson, that's his name. Okay, a little bit of a less dignified entrance for what we'll find out is our hero of the piece, Kyle Reese, played by Michael Biehn. Bit of Cameron Everyman, because he cast him again in Aliens as Lieutenant Dwayne Hicks. So I think at some point Cameron probably was intending to set up a kind of who's the good guy, who's the bad guy kind of dynamic, because before Schwarzenegger was cast, Cameron envisaged the Terminator as just being like an everyman kind of guy, someone who could blend into a crowd, and There's quite a well-known anecdote about Lance Henriksen, who did end up in the film as one of the coppers. Is it Lieutenant Volkovich? He auditioned for the film, and Henriksen's a little bit crazy. He has a little bit of an edge to him. So he turned up to the audition, and apparently he kind of made himself up to look like a robot, or whatever his version of a robot would be, cyborg, whatever. He said he put kind of like metal teeth in, and like had, you know, foil in his teeth, and bits of makeup appliances. So he kind of essentially turned up in character as the Terminator. And Schwarzenegger was supposed to be, or well, not supposed to, but Cameron wanted Schwarzenegger to be the hero. Kyle Reese. He wanted him to audition for Kyle Reese. But as the story turns out, according to Schwarzenegger at least, he was more interested in playing the role of the Terminator, and Cameron was not struck by that idea initially, but eventually he came round to, you know, Arnold's way of thinking. And then history was made, because this was essentially the film that kind of catapulted Schwarzenegger into the stratosphere, because, I mean, it's easily his most recognisable role. Certainly gave birth to his most well-known catchphrase. And in casting Schwarzenegger as the Terminator, it lends the movie more of a cat and mouse kind of feel, because obviously he's larger than life. Physically, he's a specimen, and I mean, although Michael Biehn is kind of like a, you know, fit, athletic kind of guy in a stringy, wiry kind of way. You know, side by side, you just know that he's not a physical match for Schwarzenegger as the Terminator. So the Terminator becomes, you know, much more imposing, almost unstoppable, just through looks alone. Here we got Linda Hamilton now being introduced as the mother of the human resistance. Sarah Connor. Kind of introduced as a naive kind of character. I mean, she's just talking to an inanimate, you know, burger mascot. I believe this sequence here with Schwarzenegger on the street punching through a car windshield, this was done without any permits, so the story goes. They employed some kind of guerrilla filmmaking tactics to get this film made, because it was a very low budget film. I think it was only made for like $6 million, which, when you look at the ambition of the film, it's not a whole lot of money. Here we have Dick Miller, who sadly just passed away a couple of weeks ago. You'll probably recognise Dick Miller from things like Gremlins, Gremlins 2. He was in The Burbs, The Howling. One of those faces of 80s films. Just turned up in a lot of shit. Film's actually quite briskly paced. You don't realise. I mean, it's already kind of like moving forward at quite a decent pace here. We've established we've got two guys after the same person on a collision course. The dog is absolutely driving me insane. Wolfie, lie down. Here's a fun fact which will tie into Terminator. My dog is a German Shepherd. He's called Wolfie. He's the second German Shepherd I've had called Wolfie. And I've named them after Terminator. There's a scene in Terminator 2 where as the T-1000's kind of like being introduced, John Connor rings up and speaks to his foster parents and asks, the Terminator asks in John's voice, so, how's Wolfie? I can hear him barking. She's like, Wolfie's fine, honey. Wolfie's just fine. You see, she's skewered Todd through the face with a big knife. So yeah, I named my dog after Wolfie. Even though the actual dog, John's pet dog, is called Max, not Wolfie. So obviously this film was made in like 84. Written probably a little bit earlier than that. So it couldn't really foresee the rise of things like the internet. The way technology has kind of evolved now in 2019. Because technically we're past when Judgment Day should have happened. So the Terminator's using, systematic kind of tactics to track down and kill the Sarah Connor. And there just so happens to be multiple Sarah Connors in the phone book, which it's using to actually track down. Because back in the 80s, if you wanted to know where someone lived, you'd just look in the phone book. So much for data protection, eh? The 80s were a stalker's paradise, I suppose. So here we're going to be entering into one of the flashback sequences, which is triggered by all this industrial kind of machinery. As Reese is nodding off. Kind of cleverly matching the tracks of the diggers there with the hunter-killers. And this shot here is a little bit of rear projection, which Cameron's actually quite fond of using. And I know some people seem to have an issue with like rear or front projection kind of like screens being used, saying that it doesn't really look well, but I think when it's employed the right way, it can be really effective and add, quite a large, background, or give a scene a level of scope that you wouldn't necessarily have if you were, using green screen or trying to composite things together. As, the key thing, I think, you have to get the lighting right, and there's a great scene in Aliens where Cameron uses it, where like the dropships kind of like crashing. I can't believe it's been, almost 40 years since this film came out. And we've had numerous sequels to Terminator now. And we've got another one coming out this year. And yet none of them have managed to do the story that all the fans want to see, which is the future war sequence. We want to see a Terminator film set in the future war that we see here in these scenes, because it looks amazing. Oh, that dummy just got impaled. Like the way the future war scenes are presented in this film, they're genuinely nightmarish. And kind of like end of the world shit. And I can't believe, like I say, the franchise is almost 40 years old now. Well, it's like 35 years old at this point, isn't it? 84, and we're in that 2019. So, 35 years on, and we've, no one has thought, let's fuck it, let's just do a future war movie. I don't think you can get more 80s than this scene, can you? So what's interesting is obviously the Terminator is like a cyborg and has been sent back through time by Skynet, which is kind of like a defense control system which becomes self-aware. And if you play close attention to this film, technology is fucking things up for Sarah and Kyle throughout the course of the film. As if, Skynet's already present in a way, Or sleaze. There we go, there's Lance Henriksen right there, and I'm sure most of you guys who are listening to this commentary don't need to be told, but obviously Cameron also cast Henriksen in Aliens as well as the android Bishop. Look at that 80s hair. When you could go out on a night out wearing a cardigan. Them were the days, eh? So this guy that's ditching Sarah on the answer machine, her date, that's James Cameron. And James Cameron would also go on to marry Linda Hamilton. He's got a bit of a thing for marrying women that he works with. He was married to producer of this film, Gail Ann Hurd. Married to her for quite a while, actually. He was married to Linda Hamilton as well. He also married that chick in Titanic who played the granddaughter. Was it Susie something or I can't remember her name. And I think he was married to Catherine Bigelow as well. Lance Henriksen turned up in one of Catherine Bigelow's well-known films, the vampire western Near Dark. He was like the lead vampire in that film. Along with Jeanette Goldstein, who would go on to star in Aliens as Vasquez. Paul Winfield here, he sells like the world-weary cop so well. So the answer phone message there is obviously, you know, ha ha ha, fooled you, you're talking to a machine. A little bit of foreshadowing as to what will happen later on when the Terminator shows the ability to actually mimic people's voices. Ginger also says on that machine message that machines need love too. I don't think that would work if you were to go up and give the T-800 any loving. He'd still rip your fucking spine out. So, I went to Stan College in Whitefield, Manchester, and I did media studies. Had the same class as my girlfriend at the time. We did media studies together, and for our final case study on mine, I decided to write a paper on James Cameron and his role as an auteur. Now, at this point, Titanic had just come out, so it was like 97, 98 when I was at college. So I focused on like the main themes that Cameron tends to focus on. You know, strong women and all that kind of stuff. And we had 3 tutors, I think. One of them was called Andy, who was kind of like this youngish fella, kind of nerdy, alright, decent guy. And then there was a big, well, Buffalo Bill would like describe her as a big old fat lady. I think she was called Lynn. She was pretty cool. And there was this third tutor, a guy called Charles Wimperney. And I remember his name because he was an absolute twat. He was very rotund. His head was as round as his fucking stomach. And he had this fucking beard and like a balding head, you know, that horseshoe hair shit. And Andy and Lynn, they both give me decent marks. I got like an A- off one of them, a B+ off the other. But Charles, he really disagreed with my my case work, so he marked it down as a C-, and he brought my average way down. All because he didn't like James Cameron as a filmmaker, and he thought his films had no worth whatsoever. And I was like, what a fucking... I got so disillusioned with kind of like, you know, college and unis and stuff like that, because his personal bias obviously had an impact on my fucking final score. It really pissed me off. I went into depth about, you know, how the Terminator was an allegory for things like the Terminator in this film is time, you know, essentially, because the film is wrapped around a time travel premise, you know, and then you got the lines about this is all very fucking, you know, I was only like 16, 17, whatever it was at college. So it was all basic stuff, but it's just kind of like, you know, the real killer in the film is time, because you've got that line where Kyle Reese is explaining the Terminator to Sarah, and it's like, doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear. I absolutely will not stop ever until you are dead. You know, and it's quite an easy, you know, comparison to make if you listen to those words and think about it in the terms of, you know, time. And I went into my theories about how technology is, you know, an obstacle and kind of an enemy of Kyle and Sarah in this film, independently of Skynet. And then I went into the, you know, the whole strong women in film, blah, 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 blah. So this scene here was one of the examples I used about technology being kind of an enemy to humans, because while Ginger was listening to her headphones, her boyfriend was in the other room getting murdered. Now, if she wasn't listening to her headphones, she would have heard that and maybe have been able to escape. And then we get this scene here where the Terminator thinks he's just killed Sarah. He's mistaken Ginger for Sarah. But Sarah's actually just been ratted out, essentially, by her own answer machine. So, in a weird way, the answer machine is working with the Terminator here to give Sarah's position, and obviously let him know the fact that he hasn't killed her, you know, revealing the mistaken identity kind of thing. And the really obvious one there, the name of the bar here is Tech Noir. Obviously, you know, all the connotations that go with noir, and you put tech in front of it, then you know what Cameron's trying to say there. And in a very movie fashion, he turns up literally as quick as that. I think it was in one of the supplemental kind of extras on the DVD when it was first released, where Schwarzenegger was talking about kind of like some of the body language that he used as a Terminator. And he kind of he's doing this in this scene with his eyes, where he'll kind of like turn his eyes in one direction before turning his head in that direction. And he said he was trying to mimic or kind of capture the feel of like a CCTV camera, you know, swaying backwards and forwards, kind of thing. And he does it again in the police car. He also spent quite a lot of time training with like weapons before he did this film, so he could be very efficient with the operating, like reloading and all that kind of thing with the weapons that he was going to be using. Because the way he saw it is that if he was a machine, there would be no wasted movement in like reloading or aiming and firing a weapon. I love this little finger twitch here. And then the eyes widening as if it's kind of like coming back online. If you look here, Arnie's actually quite good at when he's firing the weapons. He's quite good at not blinking. See what I mean there about the efficient reloading and kind of cocking of the weapon there. Iconic line. You got that kind of methodical driving, kind of like industrial almost kind of music kind of underlining the scene there as well. It's a really weird soundtrack to listen to kind of like independently, because it's all, you know, up and down, especially in kind of like this scene. But you listen to the soundtrack on its own, it's not a pleasant listen. I'll just put it that way. So this scene here, with the fist going through the window, that is like a fake arm on a piston that goes through the glass there. So what they did was they put Arnold on top of the car. The car was stationary, but they had like a moving wall that was zipping, you know, past the windows to give that sense of movement. And they just drove the piston through the windshield. So his eyebrows have been burnt off now, and now he's got kind of like this spiky hair. I love the smoke, like, just kind of billowing off him. So now that he's got no eyebrows, he's even more kind of creepy in a way. I would say that's kind of a natural reaction, even though he's just saved her life. You would be absolutely fucking terrified. Reese is very rough with Sarah. The 600 series. What Reese fails to mention is, as we now know through films like Terminator Salvation, the 600 series were like fucking 10 foot tall. So no wonder they were easy to spot. You didn't need them to have rubber skin to spot the fact that they were 10 fucking foot tall with a machine gun on their fucking arm. They had a minigun on the fucking hands, for Christ's sake. There you go. That's the iconic quote there, which, like I said, I drew the, very obvious line between that line and the Terminator towards it. The Terminator actually being representative of time. Like the score was done by Brad Fidel, and like the score that he's done here with kind of like that driving dum 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 dum, it's almost as if he's giving the Terminator its own heartbeat in a way. So iconic. such an unorthodox score as well. If you just listen to it, it just sounds like sounds, but it creates, the intended atmosphere and the intended feeling. So what people tend to forget about this film is that this was like, essentially, this was, even though James Cameron had directed before, this was like his first proper film. So, like, prior to this, he directed the Piranha 2 film, Spawning. But he was removed off that film. And he wasn't kind of like given any input over the final cut. I think there's some kind of story about him actually breaking in and re-editing the film. But he kind of essentially disowned it because he didn't really have any control over that film like he wanted. And prior to that, he did a short film called, I think, what was it called? Xenogenesis or something like that. But I think he was only like a co-director on that film. Like I say, it was a short film. It wasn't like a feature. But Terminator, for all intents and purposes, was his first proper directing gig, and it was based on a film that he wrote. And the story goes that he was kind of in a fever on a plane. He had like a fever dream. He had like man flu and was kind of in and out of sleep, and had this fever dream where he saw a metal skeleton rising from flames, which he essentially put into the film towards the end. The shot with the Terminator coming out of the flames from the tanker wreckage. And James Cameron's actually a very talented artist. There is, if you Google James Cameron artwork, you'll come across some really, really fantastic kind of like art that he's done for his films. He did like a sketch of like the Terminator when he was thinking about Lance Henriksen, So like the half of the face is like the endoskeleton, half of it is kind of like a loose rendition of kind of like Lance Henriksen's face. Then he did one with the Terminator coming out of the flames and shit like that. So here we have Earl Bowen, who plays Dr. Silberman, who Sarah would get to know quite well in the sequel. This is the scene that I have so many memories about, you know, just seeing them just through the cracks in that guy's fingers. I remember a few years later after seeing it, and I was still living up in the northeast at the time, and kind of like talking to a kid who lived just kind of like a couple of streets over, kind of thing, about Schwarzenegger. And he was talking about I can't remember what film I was talking, maybe Rodale or something like that, and The Running Man, and I was like, I've seen all the Schwarzenegger films, and he's like, oh, you've not seen Terminator? I was like, yeah, I've seen Terminator. He went, no, you haven't. I said, yeah, I have. He went, well, he dies in that one. I was like, what? Because I couldn't remember the fact that he died, or you know, his character died. And he was like, yeah, Schwarzenegger dies in that film. I couldn't remember it. It was like, see, I told you haven't seen it. So anyway, I remember he lent me a copy of the video, brought it round. What was his name? George Quamby, I think his name was. He was kind of like the hard nut around the estate kind of thing. So I remember, you know, rewatching it a couple of years after I'd, you know, first seen it. It's an absolute travesty that they cast Jai Courtney as Kyle Reese in Terminator Genesis. See, I didn't hate Terminator Genesis. I could kind of see what they wanted to do with it. I didn't hate it. But some of the fucking decisions they made in Genesis, that being one of the worst. Okay, so this is kind of like, when you sit and watch this film now, this is where you kind of like see the cracks, and you kind of like, okay, so this is an old, low-budget film. I mean, I suppose that shot there doesn't look too bad. But you see the limitations of the technology at the time. Now, the Terminator effects were done by Stan Winston, who sadly is no longer with us, but absolute legend. See, for 1984, and for a film that cost less than $6 million, that is... I mean, it looks alright with the glasses on. Unfortunately, you cut to a real Arnie and you can see the pores in his face, and that's quite an ambitious thing to do. You know, 1984, you've got to realise that certain things were just not possible back then, do you know? But to build a full-size animatronic and have it look photoreal, that's one of the hardest things you can do now, never mind back then. So it's kind of like, ropey as that puppet looks. Oh, yeah, mate, excuse me. It could have been worse. It could have been a lot worse, I suppose. I love how kind of, you know, how kind of intense Michael Biehn gets in that scene there. Takes no fucking prisoners, does he? So as I was saying before, with the whole technology shit, it's kind of like when Silberman goes out of the door, he completely misses the Terminator because he's distracted by his beeper. So again, you know, technology is just kind of interfering in a very, very indirect and subtle way. Um, So the whole sequence with like the Terminator in the, you know, the assault on the police station, it's just absolutely fucking brutal. And I don't think this kind of scene would be kind of like tackled in this way. Um, you know, if the film was made today, just because of, you know, the shit that's going on with kind of like gun rights and, you know, people shooting up schools and all that kind of shit in America. And so Lance Henriksen, along with Bill Paxton, is the only man who can claim to have been killed by a Terminator, an alien, and a predator. A holy trinity. So that's like the first time that Sarah's actually accepted Reese as, you know, being like her protector in a way. So I remember, like, Reese was supposed to be, like, around about 21, but obviously Bean isn't 21 here. So, you know, he obviously plays it a little bit older, but, like, moments like that where he's just like, what? You know, there's still a little bit of a naivety there about him. So again, we're, you know, seeing the Future War sequence again. It's just kind of like, I really do want to see a Future War Terminator film. I think it'd be so interesting. Because when we did see the Future War sequence in Salvation, it was all set in the daytime. It's like, what the fuck? Like, Reese has just explained you stay down during the day, but you can move about at night time. You just have to be careful of, like, the hunter killers with the infrared. But McGee comes along and he's like, no, set the whole film in the fucking desert in the daytime. So the Future War Terminator here is played by another bodybuilder, Franco Columbu, who was a buddy of Schwarzenegger from the bodybuilding scene. I love the shot of kind of like, you know, within a nightmare sequence where he's moving through and you can just like, you know, he's completely in silhouette, but you can just see like the red eyes burning through the night. Okay, so this you know scene is a little bit more ropey with the effects and stuff. I remember watching it on the BBC at one point, like late night, and this you know fuck you asshole sequence was cut. It just had the guy knocking on the door, going, "Hey buddy, you got a dead kid in there, or what?" And you know, just showed the over the shoulder glance, and then that was it. It cut to the guy like walking away. The BBC didn't like many many instances of the word fuck. Now, when they get to the Tiki Motel, as I was talking before about the dog in Terminator 2, the German Shepherd that we see at the Tiki Motel, that's actually James Cameron's German Shepherd, and that dog is also called Wolfie as well. So again, with the the theme that technology is out to get Sarah, she's obviously given away by the phone. The Terminator has off camera gone to her mother's, kicked the door in, and killed her mum, and is now impersonating her to the point where he's able to get Sarah's location out of her over the telephone. So, again, by proxy, she's been betrayed by technology in a very indirect way. Apologies, I just knocked the mic. So Sarah's kind of like looking over Kyle's scars, like in the motel sequence, and it's kind of been noted that some of his scars are in the position of like where wings would be if he was an angel. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because there is a little bit of kind of like religious allegory going on. Cameron has a bit of a habit of taking some broad stroke themes and transplanting them into his films. So John Connor, who is the saviour of mankind in the Terminator films, you will notice that he shares his name shares the initials of the other savior of the human or humankind, Jesus Christ. So there's a little bit of religious symbolism going on there. John Connor, obviously, like I say, said to be savior of the human race in the same way that Jesus was the savior of man. Born to a mother who, had immaculate conception. Kyle's, sent from the heavens in a weird way, with the scars that could be said to be where his wings were and all this kind of shit. It's yeah. So in the lovemaking scene as well, this is kind of like the turning point for Sarah's character, because she goes from being in a submissive position, on bottom, to going up onto the dominant position, going up on top, and that's kind of, reflective of where she's at as a character, accepting her role as the savior of, or the mother of the savior of, the human race kind of thing. So as she flips herself onto the dominant position, she's actually taking control of her future, taking control of her fate, and becoming what she was or is destined to be. There's Wolfie again. That's why I've got German Shepherds now, because if ever a Terminator comes up on me, I'll know. Well, this one will probably fucking just look at them. He's a bit dopey. I remember reading that Schwarzenegger actually avoided Michael Biehn and Linda Hamilton on set. He didn't think it was appropriate to actually, become too friendly with them if his character was after killing them. And in a weird way, it kind of works, because I think there's only one scene where, like, Kyle Reese and the Terminator share the same screen, and that's way back in, like, the tech noir sequence where, he's shooting at him. I mean, Kyle obviously does share the screen with the Terminator again, in the sequence that's coming up with the factory and that, but that's not Schwarzenegger anymore. He loses his skin, and it's the endoskeleton puppet. So I'm pretty sure this tunnel is the same one that's used in Back to the Future Part 2, where Marty's flying the hoverboard through the tunnel when he's getting the almanac from Biff. I just found it weird that the scream was looped in twice there for some reason. Don't know why. I love this shot with like the Terminator looking up after he's been in that crash, because the makeup looks really good here, I think, anyway. Even though it's just kind of like, you know, a plugged in eye, I think it looks really good. And when he gets into the truck, I think the makeup effects are really good there as well. Kind of like really gritty, really real kind of looking. It doesn't linger on it too long, and you know it cuts between the puppet and Schwarzenegger in prosthetics pretty cleverly. And we've got the music again, just kind of like that never-ending, just relentless drive on. And even kind of like battle damaged, and you know the Terminator is just so unrelenting. It's a real kind of like genuine threat. I love the gash in the side of the face on that puppet there. So after the tanker blows up, obviously this is where Cameron fakes the audience out with the Terminator dying, but then being reborn like rising like a phoenix out of the flames in its new guise. And it's kind of interesting that Reese refers to, like, when he's describing the Terminator to Sarah for the first time, he describes it as a cyborg. Now, it's not technically accurate because, like, from my understanding, a cyborg, is part robotic and part organic, and they both work in symbiosis. One can't work without the other. But the Terminator quite clearly, can function without its organic material. In this case, it's skin. So technically, it's not a cyborg. So that's bit of a misnomer there. So essentially, this shot here is what Cameron kind of dreamed in that influenza fueled fever dream that he had on the plane to or from Italy. And here we go to kind of like a stop motion puppet intercut with, you know, the Stan Winston scale puppet that was performed on set. So, like, in the documentary, it shows, like, the top half of the Terminator was kind of like a rig that was put on the shoulders of the, you know, the performance guy, like whoever was puppeting it. Something really kind of like old school and kind of, even though it doesn't look, you know, 100% convincing, there's something to be said for kind of like old school stop motion animation, isn't there? I think that the stop motion used for the Terminator here, it's got a very Harryhausen-esque quality to it. Such an iconic design, isn't it? The original Terminator. Like, you know, those blazing red eyes, the skull, like the chrome human-like skull with the teeth and just looking at the design of the Terminator, you can absolutely believe that that would fit into, you know, something the size and shape of Schwarzenegger's frame. And we're at fake out number 2, so the Terminator has just been blown into 1,000 itty bitty bitty pieces by Kyle's makeshift dynamite stuff. Hey, Pooch. And now, you know, as an audience member, you kind of think, he's definitely dead this time because we've already been faked out once. Well, I got fucking news for you. Cameron, don't play like that, son. It's always a bit of a gut punch when like one of your heroes who, you know, you've invested kind of like time and like emotion with on you know, the journey throughout the course of the film. It's always a gut punch when they kind of almost make it but just don't. And then this sequence just kind of like drives home what a fucking badass creation the Terminator actually is. It's kind of like just, you know, been run over by a tanker truck, that didn't stop it. Then involved in a massive explosion with said tanker truck when it blew the fuck up, that didn't stop it. Just gave it a limp, you know. And then blown to shit by an IED, that hasn't stopped it. And it's obviously damaged, it's got no legs, its fingers are kind of like, you know, snapped off and twisted, and, you know, it's all kind of mangled. That's not stopping it, it's still going. And that's what makes the Terminator kind of like so formidable. Because you really do get the sense that this is kind of like an unstoppable killing machine. I mean, look at that. Look at its left arm there. It's kind of like, it's destroyed. It doesn't really have any fingers on the end of it. Pretty sure there was a like extended version of this sequence where Reese is being wheeled away, and it's revealed that this building is actually Cyberdyne. That's a good looking pooch right there. So, like, she gets hustled here with this kind of like street urchin taking the picture that Kyle was looking at in the Future War sequence where, you know, just before they were infiltrated by Franco Columbu. so that kind of like rounds out the film, you know, and just kind of highlights the paradox that's at the heart of this film. It's kind of like, well, how could Kyle Reese be the father of John Connor if, you know, John Connor needs to exist in order to send him back? It's the grandfather paradox. And it kind of like doesn't really make sense, and like that's the problem with like time travel films. When you come up against the, you know, time travel, and they you know, throw one of these paradoxes at you, you can kind of think them through until you have an aneurysm, basically. And not only, you know, the Kyle Reese side of things as well, but there's the paradox that you'll find out in Terminator 2. It's like the arm that was left out of the metal press when it was reaching towards Sarah there, just as it was crushed. That becomes the basis of Cyberdyne's work on Skynet and the T-800s. So if that T-800 was never sent back through time, then Cyberdyne could never begin working on Skynet and Terminators. Makes your head hurt. But that's what kind of makes it a classic. And it is a classic. It's kind of a perfect film in a way. I mean, perfect in, you know, the way it's actually presented. I'm not talking about, yeah, I know it's got a dodgy kind of like Arnold puppet here and there, but as a movie, it's kind of structured quite perfectly. You know, it's a perfect chase movie, cat and mouse kind of thing all the way through. And I love it. It's just a fantastic film. And my mind's going blank now because it's like 2:30 in the morning and I'm pretty tired. So yeah, that's it. That's the Terminator. That's my commentary for the Terminator. I hope you've enjoyed watching it with me, and I'll probably get around to doing Terminator 2 at some point. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for listening to me waffle on. I hope I've given you some bits of facts and trivia. Okay, guys. Take care. Bye.